Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you grew up with anime, chances are you've dreamed of piloting a giant robot, right? From the thunderous footsteps of a colossal giant to the sleek, agile movements of a high-tech mobile suit, mecha have been a cornerstone of anime for decades. But have you ever stopped to think about how these steel behemoths evolved? It's not just about getting bigger or adding more lasers. It's a journey from simple superweapons to complex symbols of the human soul. Today, we're powering up the launch sequence and diving deep into the incredible evolution of Mecha anime. It all started in 1963 with Tetsujin 28 Go, or as many of us in the West know it, Gigantor. This was the genesis. A young boy, Shotaro Kaneda, controlled a giant, non-sentient robot with a remote control. Tetsujin was essentially a tool, a powerful asset to fight crime and evil forces. He was a force for good, but he wasn't a character. The focus was on the young pilot and his adventures. This laid the foundation, the concept of a boy and his giant robot protecting the world. It was simple, heroic, and captured the imagination of a post-war generation in Japan, a nation fascinated with technological rebirth and power. Then, in 1972, everything changed. Go Nagai unleashed Mazinger Z upon the world, and the game was never the same. For the first time, the pilot, Koji Kabuto, wasn't standing on the sidelines with a remote. He was inside the robot, docking his pilder into Mazinger's head. This was the birth of the piloted super robot. Suddenly, the pilot and the Mecha were one unit. When Mazinger took a hit, Koji felt the impact. The connection was visceral, immediate. Mazinger Z wasn't just a machine, it was an extension of Koji's will and courage. And let's not forget the rocket punch and breast fire. The iconic special moves shouted with passion. This new formula, combining a hot-blooded pilot with a near-indestructible robot full of fantastic weapons, created the super robot subgenre, a template that would dominate the 70s with classics like Getter Robo and Grendizer. For nearly a decade, super robots reigned supreme. They were modern-day knights in shining armor, fighting monstrous threats in standalone episodes. But audiences began to mature, and they wanted more than just a monster of the week. They craved complexity, realism, and stories that reflected the anxieties of their own world. And in 1979, Yoshiyuki Tomino delivered exactly that, with Mobile Suit Gundam. Gundam was revolutionary. It introduced the real robot subgenre. The titular Gundam wasn't a unique, godlike entity. It was a prototype, a mass-produced military weapon in a brutal interstellar civil war. Mobile suits needed maintenance, ran out of ammunition, and could be destroyed by a well-placed shot from a grunt unit. The pilots weren't always screaming heroes. They were soldiers, often teenagers, thrust into the horrors of war, dealing with loss, PTSD, and moral ambiguity. The line between good and evil was blurred. Amuro Ray, the pilot, wasn't always eager to fight. He was often scared, burdened, and conflicted. This wasn't a story about good versus evil. It was a story about war and the humans caught in its unforgiving gears. Gundam treated the mecha as a believable piece of military hardware, and in doing so, it created a universe with unprecedented depth and drama. The impact of Gundam was seismic. The 1980s became the golden age of the real robot genre. Series like Super Dimension Fortress Macross took the concept and added its own unique spin. Macross blended realistic mecha combat with its transformable Valkyrie fighters, with a deep space opera, and, most surprisingly, the power of pop music. It explored themes of culture clash, love, and communication, suggesting that a song could be more powerful than any missile. Then you had series like Armored Trooper Votums, which took the realism to its grittiest extreme. The Scope Dog mechs were little more than disposable walking tanks, highlighting the brutal, unglamorous reality of a grunt soldier's life. The 80s proved that mecha could be a vehicle for any kind of story, from gritty war dramas to sweeping space romances. As we entered the 1990s, the genre was ripe for another paradigm shift. The foundations of super robots and real robots were firmly established, and creators began to deconstruct them. This brings us to 1995 and the cultural phenomenon that is Neon Genesis Evangelion. On the surface, the Evangelion units look like super robots, giant, almost biological beings fighting monstrous angels. But Hideaki Anno twisted that formula into a deep, often painful, psychological exploration. Piloting an Eva wasn't empowering, it was traumatic. The link between pilot and machine was a neurological and spiritual violation. The Evas were extensions of the pilot's deepest insecurities and their fractured psyches. The show used the Mecha framework to explore depression, alienation, and the desperate search for human connection. Evangelion proved that a mecha could be more than a weapon or a vehicle. It could be a living, breathing metaphor for the human condition itself. Following Evangelion's introspective turn, the late 90s and 2000s saw the genre explode in a glorious fusion of styles. Series like The Vision of Escaflowne blended mecha with high fantasy, setting giant, steam-powered Gaimelefs in a world of knights and dragons. Gurren Lagann took the hot-blooded passion of classic super robots and cranked it up to 11, celebrating the power of absurd, defiant willpower with drills that would pierce the heavens. It was a heartfelt love letter to the genre's origins, wrapped in a spectacularly animated package. On the other end of the spectrum, Code Geass combined the intricate military strategy of the real robot genre with the dramatic flair of a super robot show focusing on the tactical and moral choices of its anti-hero protagonist, Lelouch. The lines were now completely blurred. A show could be both real and super, blending psychological depth with over-the-top action. So, where do we stand today? Mecha anime continues to evolve, reflecting our modern world. From the stunning cinematic battles in Gundam, The Witch from Mercury, which explores corporate warfare and social identity, to the gritty, grounded designs of newer sci-fi hits, the genre is still a powerful canvas for storytelling. The evolution from Tetsujin 28-Go to today has been a long and fascinating journey. It shows us that mecha were never just about the robots. They were about the pilots inside them and the worlds around them. They are symbols of power, tools of war, cages of trauma, and ultimately vessels for the human spirit. They are reflections of our hopes for technological advancement and our fears of its consequences. From simple steel giants to complex symbols of the soul, the mecha genre remains one of the most dynamic and enduring pillars of anime. What's your favorite mecha series of all time? Is it a classic super robot, a gritty real robot, or a mind-bending modern fusion? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to read your picks. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey through anime history, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. Until next time, stay passionate and keep watching.